Good morning and welcome to the Black Pill Radio Show. I'm your host, Mr. Tyler. And today's topic, we are talking about podcasting, creating a podcast, and podcasting and videocasting being the new black media. I have a bunch of panelists with me today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and then we're going to get right into the topic. So caller from 310, can you introduce yourself and tell us what your website and or social media tags are?
Sure. My name is Ayana Angel, and I'm the host of the Switch Pivot or Quit podcast, which can be found at switchpivotorquit.com and also on Instagram at Switch Pivot or Quit.
Excellent. And caller from 770, can you do the same thing, please?
Yes, my name is Kristen Black, and I'm actually on Facebook Live as the Chris and Miss Betty Show. And so you can find me on Facebook at the Chris and Miss Betty Show, and also I go live from Instagram at conversations_W_Kristen, and conversations is spelled with the letter K.
Excellent. And caller from 646, can you do the same thing as well, please?
Hi, I'm Jamila Sufront of Journey to Launch, the blog and podcast. I'm also a money coach, and my podcast is all about launching financial freedom and helping others do the same. And you can find my podcast at all wherever you listen to podcasts, and then I'm on all social media as Journey to Launch.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamila. And caller from 202.
Sure. Hi, I'm Patricia, and I run a company called the Podcast Maven. What I do is I help people create and then launch their podcast. After that, I do all of the editing for them. You can find me on Facebook as the Podcast Maven and on Instagram as the Podcast Maven. And my website is podcastmaven.com.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies, for joining the panel. So let's get started. We want to talk about the new black media, which is mainly internet radio, podcasting, videocasting. A lot of us have our platforms and our channels, and we use that to get our information out there because we don't have mainstream media channels. I think TV One is the only black-owned media channel that we really have like media coming out of it, and they just recently canceled one of their biggest media shows. So, a lot of us are going to the internet. So my first question is going to be for Jamila. Why is it important for us to have our own media outlets as black people delivering content to black consumers and black educators?
Well, I think it's very important to have voices that sound like us and people who look like us disseminating information, because what I find, especially in the personal finance space, is that, before I started my podcast and my blog, obviously there are a lot of people in an existing space talking about personal finance. And, there are a lot of great African Americans talking about personal finance. And what I found was that the niche, which is financial independence, that I am in, which is really more about, being able to build your assets to a point where you can retire early or just not depend on a paycheck. That part of like the more advanced personal finance was not really being talked about by people of color. And so I wanted to create a platform in which other people who looked like me could relate and feel like they could do the same. So I really do think that in order to be inspired, you could be inspired by anyone. I've been inspired by, just like, it hasn't been limited to African Americans. I'm inspired by anyone that I can learn from. But I think for us, it's particularly important to just make sure we have voices in these different niches and communities, because it just helps other people feel like they can do it when they see someone else doing it that looks like them.
Excellent. And we're going to talk about the financing aspect in a minute. I want to ask that same question to Ayana. Why is it important for us to have our own black-owned, black-run, black-supported media?
I think it's to me it's just because of the connection that we're able to make with one another. Like Janelle just said, it's like, when you see someone speaking about things that maybe are foreign to you, but could be of benefit to you, you tend to pay attention a bit differently when you can connect with the person that's delivering the information, and when you feel like maybe they can understand where you might be coming from. And that's whether it's from a financial aspect, from a career aspect, from a wellness aspect. It doesn't matter to me. It's just more so. It's the same way as when you see role models and how you sort of identify with your role models. A lot of times it's because it's someone that looks similar to you or feels like you can connect with them in a certain way for whatever the reason is, and you tend to listen up, pay attention, and take the information to heart a little bit more just because of the person that's delivering the information. And then it's also about controlling the narrative. You know, sometimes there's a lot of misrepresentation out there, and people that aren't conscious of how they're portraying themselves and their community. So I think it's important for us to just be aware of those things and then also be a part of adding positive to the conversation and controlling the narrative so that we're not always looked at in certain lights.
Excellent. I like everything that you stated, and everything you stated is very accurate. Christian, what can you add to that in terms of why we need to control our own media content and platforms?
Yes, and just sort of echoing what the ladies just said, you know, there's so many topic groups that we either belong to or that we aspire to belong to. Like I said, as far as, you know, home ownership, somebody may not be a homeowner yet, but they want to be in that bracket. There are some people who are suffering with depression or anxiety or, you know, building healthy relationships. And so I believe it's important for us to not only talk about these things as people of color, but to own these things, to show other people in our community that we are able to, you know, own a platform about mental health awareness and own these doctors' offices and own these places that you can come to and listen to or patronize or to get the information that you need to succeed in your personal life and your finances, in places that you're trying to go and things that you're trying to do. And so I think ownership is just very important as far as a model, you know, that we can show the people in our community and people in other communities, you know, that we're on the same level, that we can own these things, that we can have the right to our things, that we can control what we say and how we say it and how we conduct business. And it's attractive to the people of our community and people all over the world, honestly.
Excellent. So I want to jump next to caller 443. Can you just jump into the conversation by introducing yourself and introduce the website that you have and or the social media platforms that you're a part of?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Nakara Campbell, a.k.a. Nikki C., and I am a part of the Remedy podcast. And the Remedy is your inspiration through the chaos. So we cover everything from pop culture to politics, to beauty, to faith. And you can find us on all places where you get your podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. And we're also on Twitter at the Remedy Podcast, and also Instagram at Remedy Podcast. So hopefully everyone takes a listen. We just celebrated our year anniversary yesterday, so we're little newbies to the game, but we've grown quite a bit.
Well, congratulations. Black Pearl Radio is 1 year in as well.
Thank you.
So we're striving, which is great. So, Nikki, the first question we threw out was, why is it important for Black people to control and own their own media?
I think it's important for Black people to own their own media because it's important that we control our own narrative. With the celebration of Kwanzaa, I think one value that I definitely affiliate with is Kujichagulia, which is self-determination, which is defining and naming ourselves. And I think with creatives, we sometimes want to go into a broader audience. And with certain platforms, they try to box us in. And I think it's important that being Black is not monolithic. We're different. Everyone listens to different things, does different things. And I think it's important that we just make sure that we know we control our narrative so we don't become boxed in or we put out something that we really don't agree with, and we just do it because we just want to hit that broader audience, or we think that's what other people want, when people really just want you to be yourself.
Excellent. And then that same question is going to go to Patricia. Patricia, I know you talked about you didn't deal with this too much, but from what the other lady said, how can you piggyback off of that and add to why it's important for Black people to control their own content?
Okay, yeah. I can just echo what all of these other great ladies have said, that when you own something, you have full control. So the way that you are portrayed, the way in which your message goes across is not going to be censored or altered. So I think ownership for any community, especially a community that feels that they are underrepresented or misinterpreted, ownership is the first thing that we should strive for, so that our message comes across as clearly as we want it to, without any changes in direction or my goodness, what's the word? Without any changes in direction, or as honestly and as clearly as we want it to be. So it's about a sense of honesty and integrity. I think that's why ownership is important, and empowerment.
Very good. So the next question for you ladies is, how is it important, or how does your company regarding media contribute to the growth of the Black community? And I'll let Jamila take that question.
So I think it's pretty important. Financial education and empowerment for our community is, obviously it's something that there are some intrinsic and some generational things that have prevented us from building wealth. And so I think now, better than ever, is a great time where we have so much opportunity and resources available to us that, despite maybe our upbringing and what our parents didn't teach us, it's time to take our own power back when it comes to our finances. And so I really do believe that, like a financial education platform, and especially one that talks about not just the foundations are important, so I deal with the foundations a lot, like the budgeting and the mindset, because to me that all determines success. But I want to open up the space that people understand that there is a way to craft and manage your finances so that you can live the life of your dreams. You don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to be necessarily an entrepreneur even, but you can still have a good life with what you have, obviously, but optimizing it. And so I think it's just really important because in our community, we don't have some of these foundational topics talked about, especially in the school system. And so I think it's a better time more than ever to talk about it and bring this to the forefront. I like to say that Journey to Launch is bringing financial independence to the masses, because when I first found out about financial independence, I was just in shock that that was even possible, that you can, you could save up and invest your money, and there were people retiring and, not working in jobs they hated. And so my goal is to really bring that to a wider audience, to our audience, so that they know they can do the same thing.
So in relation to our children, how does Journey to Launch help the youth?
Well, I mean, this Journey to Launch is fairly also pretty new. So, we're right now, in terms of the podcast, on episode 26. We released episode 27 this week. And the blog is about, a year and a half old. So for me, it's a lot of the information that I'm disseminating is, online. But I get a lot of parents, because I'm a parent myself, who talk about, because what I'm saying or what I'm teaching, they're passing down or they're talking to their kids. So that's one way. But what I'd like to do starting in the future is develop programs and workshops for the community and for the school. So that's going to be on my list of, a long list of things I want to accomplish during the next couple of years.
All right, sounds good. So I want to take that question to Ayana. How does your company contribute positively to the growth of the Black community?
I would say that the Switch Pivot or Quit podcast contributes in the way that, for myself, a part of the reason that I even host the show and came up with it is because of my own experiences in the corporate world. And it's funny because some of my friends, we joke that I have like PTSD from my personal experience because I went through a lot at the company that I worked for. And I think a lot of people go through a lot of trials and tribulations in their professional career, but a lot of times, especially as women, we just sort of like suffer in silence, or we complain to our girlfriends, but we really want out of our situation. And one of the things that I feel like we're trained to do is check the boxes, check the boxes, check the boxes, but nobody talks to you about how do you really feel? What do you really want? What are your expectations for yourself out of life? And at a certain point, you have to start to have that conversation with yourself when you start to realize, hey, this day-to-day isn't exactly working for me anymore. So what can I do? What do I need to do? And the Switch, Pivot, or Quit podcast, that's where we come in, and that's why I want us to come in and that conversation and hearing from other women. And look, I'll be frank with you, my show is, I did not set out specifically to create my show for the Black community. I set out to create my show for the voice that's not there, telling you it's okay it's okay to feel the way that you feel if you're feeling like you're not fulfilled in your day-to-day and you want to change and you want to mix things up. But as a result of me being a Black woman, I understand that, there's the majority of my audience that has been drawn to me is Black women, and they can understand when I talk about things like being the only person in the room and having to represent in conversations where, we're talking, because I used to work in entertainment, and we're talking about a subject where I'm the only person that seems to be knowledgeable about the artists or the entertainers that they're talking about. That's pretty awkward when they're always looking at you for the answer. But then outside of that, you feel like they don't value your opinion as much. So I think it's very important to have the conversations that we're having on the podcast and to let people know how to navigate the space that they're in. That's why I talk to people like HR representatives and people that can give great knowledge and insight as to how to navigate your day-to-day world, things that maybe your parents aren't able to teach you because they weren't navigating the same world. So it's just having the conversations that need to be had and giving you the insight that you need, but you might not be getting it from the people that are around you necessarily.
Got it. Excellent. So I want to take that same question to Christian. What was it like when you were thinking about creating your podcast? And as Ayana said, she wasn't thinking about the Black community in particular. She was thinking about people who don't have a voice. What was your process like? Were you thinking about the Black community when you created your podcast? And if not, has it evolved into where you are now thinking about the Black community in terms of content that you put out?
Well, for me, I'm just a lover of people in general, and so when I saw out to do what me and my mother are doing, so the name of my show is, like I said, The Chris and Miss Betty Show, and I'm a millennial and my mother is a baby boomer, and so we talk about relationship building and the importance of building healthy relationships spiritually with yourself and with the people that are closest to you, be it family, friends, and so forth. And so when I saw out to create this platform, working in the area of mental health for almost 10 years, I'm able to see that the biggest issue that people are having is relationships and how that colors their home life, how that colors their finances, how that colors their personal self-worth and esteem, how that colors their dating relationships and their marriages. And so relationships for me is the foundation of it all. And so when I decided to create this, it was more so for people in general because, to be honest, the relationships that we have aren't just all Black-on-Black relationships. We have relationships with people of different colors, ethnicities, and backgrounds. And so how do I become confident and comfortable within myself to join into a relationship or some type of group with other people that may even look like me or don't? And how do I embrace my authenticity and bring that to the table unapologetically in every platform? And so when I created this, it was not necessarily for the Black community, but however, because I am a woman of color, many of our audience members are African American, and so it's amazing because in our generation or in our culture, we weren't really taught the healthiest ways to relate to our family members or friends. And so we have a lot of chaos and tension in our lives, in our homes, because, of the differences. And it's amazing to do the show with my mother, who's a baby boomer, who was raised differently, and the way that she thinks and the way that she processes life. And it's much different than the way that I think and I process life. But I love the fact that she's willing to be vulnerable and really to be willing to be inclusive to the new way of doing things, and also me the same way to her, adopting some of those traditional values and just bridging that gap so that people can see that, yes, you can build healthy and positive relationships with people of different generations, with family members, and just have differences of opinion but still respect one another. And so I just think that message that we share weekly on our Facebook Lives and our Instagram Lives and YouTube is just to really help make a better person so that we can make a better world. And I am just an advocate that our relationships are the foundation of it all.
Excellent. So now I want to go to Nikki C. from the Urban Tea. What were your thoughts when you and your group were putting together the podcast in terms of who was going to be your audience, and specifically when we talk about the Black community, because you're a Black-owned platform, how was your podcast going to help the Black audience specifically?
Yeah, so when we decided to start The Remedy, me and my co-host, we wanted to be a hub for women of color because we are women of color. So our main target was women of color, whether they be Black or brown. That was pretty much our outreach, but mostly for Black women. So when we decided to think about guests, who we were going to have for the show, we definitely decided that it was going to be Black entrepreneurs in the DC, DMV area. So primarily all of our guests have been women or Black entrepreneurs in the area. We've even had Representative Maxine Waters on the show. We've had a fellow podcaster, P. Ryan from the Hung Up Pod on the show. We had Brittany Waters, who is a local DJ within the area. And then even our recording studio, we record out of the Trap Factory, which is in Hyattsville, and it's ran by a young Black man named Dante as well. So whatever we do, we try to make sure that we buy Black, or at least facilitate others to buy Black if possible, so we can strengthen the dollar within our own community, because that's hard. Especially we have a lot of young, talented people within the D.C. area or DMV area or all throughout, and we just want to make sure that whatever we do, we facilitate the buying of Black products or helping other Black young entrepreneurs or Black entrepreneurs, period, within the area.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing with your podcast. I do want to jump to Patricia, who's the Podcast Maven, and I want to ask you a little different question. When you work with your clients, who's your target audience? Do you have an array of different groups that you work with, or are you specifically targeting a certain group? And then from there, we're going to get into the process of setting up a podcast.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Kyla. I mostly work with female entrepreneurs, and then to really dig down into my niche, I like to work with coaches and authors, only because a lot of these people are doing, coaches specifically are doing one-on-one work. These are the services they sell, and they like to help people individually. So I carved that niche out for myself because it's about podcasting as a medium. The medium itself allows for a sense of intimacy, and you have the freedom to take a longer time to express yourself and allow people to actually really to feel as if they really know you. So my niche is mostly female, and they are coaches, and I target myself towards women who consider themselves to be introverted, just like I am, because I feel that it's sometimes the quietest person in the room. They have a lot to say, but they take the time to craft it and to think before they speak. And, everybody's message is important. Everybody's story is unique. And podcasting gives people that medium and that chance, and it doesn't exclude anybody to get their story and their point of view across. And diverse voices just make for a better community. So that is what I do.
All right. Sounds very good. So we want to jump into the process of that person who, starting the new year, they're thinking about creating their own podcast or their own video cast. What advice can we give them before we actually get into the equipment usage and what they can purchase? Just tips in terms of, you want to create that podcast. What do you need to know? What do you need to look out for? What might the expenses be like? I'll take that question and I'll pass that to Christian. When you set up your podcast, before you even started purchasing equipment, what was the thought that went behind that process? And what did you learn? So now what's the tips that you can give out and the advice that you can give out?
Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of the other ladies concerning this question, but I will say this. Just do it. I know that, for so long we toy with an idea forever. We'll say, I want to do this, I want to do it, and you can look up 3 or 4 years later and you're still saying what you want to do. And so for me, I was in that similar situation. I've always wanted to do this type of media outlet with my mother, and it's like, oh, we should do it. We just talked about it forever. And so I said, you know what, we're going to do it, and we're going to take what we have. And so basically, because you can't start with what you don't. And so taking what we had, a laptop computer, the iPhone, and I bought a little stand off Amazon for my phone, and that's how we basically just started our live Facebook Live. And once we got started, we gained the momentum and did more research and things of that nature. But sometimes I find that too much research can paralyze you before you actually get going. And so for me, it was important to start. And so we started with what we had: the computer, the cell phone, the little stand, and we've upgraded and gotten new equipment, and we plan on creating a studio in my mother's home this year. But I look forward to hearing from the other ladies about, the equipment and the things that they got. But for me, it's just important to get started. So if anybody's listening, I can't overemphasize that enough. Start with what you have. Get out there. Get your message out there, because somebody is waiting on you. You hold the blessings and the key that somebody needs to enhance their life.
So her advice is for you guys to just get started, start doing it. Don't get overburdened by all of the processes and the research that you guys are going to have to do. But at some point, you really have to just start doing it, which is good advice. I want to take the same question to Ayana. Don't get into the equipment yet. Just tell us what the process and the thinking was for you when you were going to begin your podcast, and what advice can you give to others that you've learned from that process?
Sure. So when I first launched the podcast, I had been thinking about doing it for about a year prior, and I had talked to other people that I knew, friends of mine who were operating in this space. And for me, I was a podcast listener, so I was looking at it like, I want to be able to offer something in this space to my audience that I had already created via my website and social media. But I wanted to be very specific with who I was targeting, what my messaging was, because it's easy to just say, I'm going to start a podcast and get on and start talking about anything. But for me, I really wanted it to have direction, and I wanted it to be in line with the messaging and the types of topics that I was already talking about and already putting out there. And I wanted it to make sense. And what I knew was, I hated when I would get on and see the title of a podcast, start listening, and then it takes them 30 minutes to get to the point of what they said that they would be talking about. That was annoying and frustrating to me. So I knew that I did not want to host the same type of show. So I was very clear about the type of show that I wanted to host and how I wanted the direction and the flow to be. And my suggestion to anybody that's thinking about starting a podcast would be, I think you should do your research. I think you should listen to shows and find shows that are similar to how you would want to set your show up so that you're not all over the place. And because it is still a responsibility in that you are, no matter what, at the end of the day, we all have a lot of access to do a lot of things today and put out content now that we never had access to before, but that doesn't mean that you need to put out BS. It means that you need to work on and concentrate on putting out quality content. So make sure you know who else is operating in the space so that you can be confident that what you're putting out, when you finally put it out, is able to be mentioned in the same breath as some of the other content that's out there, because you're probably coming up, let's say, behind the game because you're just getting started. There may be somebody who's been podcasting for a year already. Okay, I would think that when you have people listen to your show, you want them to think of your show and think of it in the same light as somebody who's been doing this for a long time. So you want that feeling of feeling seasoned. So to me, I think you should do your research. You should know who your audience is, know who you are talking to or want to talk to, know what would appeal to them, and just make sure that you understand the space that you're getting into before you get into it, so that you don't feel like and look like a complete novice, and know that it is approachable and it is doable. And when I first started, I did not invest in a microphone or anything like that. I actually first started on SoundCloud because that was a platform where you could actually distribute your content for free to get started for a certain amount of hours. So for me, that felt comfortable because I didn't know if it was something I would actually want to stick with. So I would just say do your research and understand what the space looks like so that you can maximize the opportunity that you're trying to give yourself. And I actually talk about all of this. I teach a podcasting course for Media Bistro. So if anybody's interested, you can go to MediaBistro.com and look up that podcasting course under Ayana Angel, and it's tips, tools, and tactics for creating a killer podcast.
Sounds great. And we will post those resources on our website, which is blackpillradio.com. On the resource page, we'll have links to different things that you guys have mentioned during this podcast, as well as links to your social media and your website. So if anybody didn't get to write that down, don't worry about it. The link will be up tomorrow, and then you guys can follow up with that. So I want to take the same question to Jamila. Just give advice and tips. Don't go into the equipment yet because we're going to do that last.
Sure. So similar to what the lady said before me, it's really important to just figure out like what you like. So I was an avid listener of podcasts. So for me, it wasn't too hard to figure out the direction I wanted to go and the type of guests I wanted to have, because from listening to so many podcasts, I really understood what I liked. So I really based it off of the things I wanted to learn and what I like. And then just to circle back a bit, you know, while like many of the women said, like, I'm a black woman, so I naturally attract, black women listeners, which obviously that's amazing. But, my guests range, like, I don't only have black guests on, I have all types of guests, because for me, the education and inspiration can come from anyone. And so, I do have a diverse group of listeners. And so that's another thing to think about too, is like, who is your listener? I know, we talk about a lot in like entrepreneurship, like your target market and your target audience. So it's important to understand who that is when you're creating the podcast, because then it gives you better ideas of like the content to create for them. And also, I would say that, there are tons of resources on support groups actually online. When I first was thinking about the podcast, apart from just listening to, a lot of podcasts, there's some Facebook groups that I joined that were just like supportive and helped, figure out kind of like, some of the tech stuff. So that was helpful. I also, because I had a blog first, I was able to reach out to my existing audience and ask them kind of like what topics they wanted to hear. So I think if you do have an audience already, it's important to tap into them to see what they'd like to hear. And even if you don't have an audience, I think if you're thinking about a podcast, it's never too early then, just to put up a, website or a social media handle and start reaching out and asking questions. So I would say the process, there's a lot to put into it, but it's one of those things where you just have to do it, because if you think about all the steps there are to do, you might not ever start, because there are a lot of steps. But if you take it one step at a time, if you just, continually research and if you have to take a course, take a course.
But it's one of those things that once you start, you're not going to learn necessarily the best until you're actually doing it.
Excellent advice, and I'm listing all this advice, and I'm going to run it down towards the end. But I want to come to Nikki next. Nikki, what advice would you give to those people out there who are thinking about starting a podcast but are not sure where to go?
So for me, definitely what all the ladies said. But for sure, I use Podcast in Color. And Podcast in Color is a huge help. It's ran by this Black woman named Barry. And she has like one of the largest directories of all Black podcasters, or like Black podcasts, excuse me. And she just has a really good hub, and she gives out advice and like what she sees and what she doesn't like, and what she has saw in the past, what she's just like about. So me and my co-host kind of use all of that and try to make sure we have that. So when we first started, we made sure we had show notes. We definitely, like in Apple Podcasts and even on Google Play and all those other avenues, there's a place where you can put all your show notes. So that shows where everybody, if they're going to be interested in the show, it's like where's the train of thought going on within the show, just keeps everybody else on task. And then also just thinking about a name, even for the Remedy, it kind of just came in conversation. We didn't try to think too hard. It's just like, come on, like something that we want, something that we think we need. And then we threw out the names to people on a Twitter poll, as well as our tagline, and we just let the people vote on a Twitter poll from all of our channels. And we were like, okay, like, what do you guys want, and what do you guys see? Like, what do you think about this or that? And we pretty much relied on a lot of our friends and a lot of our following. So definitely just listening to your following about what you want to see. I personally am not an engineer, so I definitely went to a studio. That's not the route you have to take, but I'm not an engineer, and I don't really particularly want to become one. So we went to a studio, and Dante's awesome, and he puts it all together for us. So shout out again to Trap Factory, because I cannot do any of that. I do have a mic, which I do appreciate a lot, which is the Blue Ball mic that I use. And I use that sometimes when I'm sick and I can't go to the studio, but my co-host can, and I don't want to get everybody else sick. So I do have a studio in-house, and I just use GarageBand on my Mac. But another advice I would give to people who are thinking about starting a podcast, like, it's hard, but it's rewarding in the end. And I know at first you think no one's listening to you, but then it's going to be at one point where it's going to be a breakthrough. If you just stay consistent and you put out really good content and you just keep your head up, like, believe me, all your hard work is going to pay off. And I think that's like number one, because sometimes it can be really discouraging, but it starts to pay off and you'll realize like people really do love what you're putting out.
Excellent advice. Thank you. And last but not least, we want to go to Patricia. Patricia, to somebody out there who wants to start that podcast, but they're not sure which direction to go in, give like one or two pieces of advice for them that could get them started.
Sure. Thank you, Tyler. I would say, you know what, they should take on board everything that the other ladies have just suggested. And in a nutshell, you know, just decide when you want to launch and really go for that date, and then just do it. Looking at your audience is important, but first of all, you know, look at you. What do you like? What do you love? What do you spend time thinking about? What do you look for? That should give you an idea of what kind of topics that, you know, you would follow through. Even if you had a small audience, you're passionate about it, because podcasting is a long-term game. And then, like the other lady said, look at your audience and do a little bit of research, maybe on your social media. What questions are people asking? What do people want to know? Where is their confusion? What clarity can you bring? And then, you know, digging down into those different subjects and topics, those become things that you will talk about. On the equipment side, keep it simple. I would suggest you do not go out and buy a microphone immediately. Get comfortable with what you're doing, as long as you have a laptop and you can download a free software called Audacity. It's awesome. Go for Audacity. If you have a Mac, you can use GarageBand, but you can use Audacity on a Mac or a Windows machine. Start making some recordings in there. And if you're not using a microphone, if you don't have one, the Apple headsets, just the earphones that come with your phone, they give very good sound quality for what they are. And once you're getting comfortable with the process, working out the software and just recording, just start with that. Start with that and watch a few videos. I also have an editing course, Podcast Maven, but, watch a few videos, learn how to put your stuff together, and then just get it out there. People will be forgiving if, you stammer a little bit, but just tell them in the first couple of episodes, it's important to me to get this out there. I hope to grow better. I need your support. And please give me feedback. And I'm always open to suggestions on how I can make the sound better. So I would say, you know what? Decide, give yourself a deadline, and put it out there. And then when you know a little bit more about what you're doing, that's when you can start investing in the microphone.
Okay,
Focus on the content first before you start getting into the equipment.
Sounds great. Thank you for that advice. So let's run through the list right now. We have Just Do It. So for those who've been researching for a long time and you're still procrastinating, just get out there and start recording the content, putting it out. We need clear content, stick to the point. As one of the ladies mentioned, sometimes it takes a long time for podcasters to get to the point that the podcast was originally about. And some people are frustrated with that. So just jump to the point. Make sure that your content is of quality recording and quality information. Also, you need to know your audience. So it's important that you might want to survey your audience. For those who have existing blogs and things like that, see what your audience is interested in talking about. There are support groups out there for you guys. So look into that, whether it be support groups from different websites, support groups from blogs, support groups from meetup.com. Just go into those different support groups and they can help you kind of put together the podcast. Also listen to your followers, work with your passion. Whatever you're passionate about is probably what you should be talking about. We did mention one resource, Podcast in Color. So look into that. And then lastly, have a launch date in mind. At some point, you got to set a deadline to achieve this goal of launching a podcast and then make that happen. And that's very good advice, ladies. So now we want to get into the equipment because people out there really want to know, what are you guys using? And take like a minute and a half to answer the question because we got 15 minutes left on the broadcast and there are 5 of us online. So people want to know what you guys are using in terms of mics, mixers. I know Nikki C mentioned that she actually goes to a studio, which is one way you can do it. You can go to a studio and they can do everything for you and you guys just kind of talk. Or you can do this at home. Your studio could be also mobile. So you can take this on the road. We all know we need a laptop. So that's just the first thing. Everybody needs a laptop. But outside of a laptop, what are you guys using to create your content? And Jamila, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I really, just like you said, I have a laptop and I have a ATR 2100 mic that I got off of Amazon. I also bought like a boom arm to go with it, so it just connects to my desk or my kitchen table. And then I have Audacity to edit. And so I would say this was a huge like benefit or tip that, like, if I could do it all over again, I'd do it again, is that I learned to edit my podcast myself first, which was, it took a lot of work and it was frustrating and it took a long time and I really don't enjoy editing. But I'm glad that I did learn how to edit because it just gave me an idea of, like, one, what I could do to improve, like, just the flow, and it gave me that technical skill. And so, I also hire out sometimes people to edit. I'm working with a podcast editor now. And before her, I was working with a group that, that actually didn't deliver on a episode edit, like, the night before. And luckily I knew how to edit myself, so I was able to, like, do it myself. So, like, that's one of the things I know we didn't really, haven't touched on yet, but just, like, that skill set of just, even if you're not going to continue to edit, I mean, it is a good idea to at least understand the editing process. So for me, I'm really simple. I record in my
in my kitchen, on my kitchen table, or in my bedroom if my husband is, downstairs. And so I just have my computer, my ATR 121 mic, the boom arm. Oh, and I do use headphones. So if I'm recording with a guest, I use headphones so that way there's no echo or feedback on the other end. So I have headphones for that. And, that's really it. And just Audacity is for me when I'm editing it myself.
So 2 questions for you.
Editor.
Are you using an audio interface?
Sorry?
Are you using an audio interface? Like a mixer or a box that goes from your mic into your laptop so that you can mix it? Or are you just doing that straight through Audacity?
No, I'm just recording it straight through Audacity and editing it from there.
Okay. And then
I also host another thing
And then you mentioned, so your broadcasts aren't live. They're pre-recorded and then you upload them.
Yes, it's not live. It's pre-recorded. I record it and edit it and then upload it. And my host is Lipson. That's another important thing is decide where do you want to host your podcast. And so I host with Lipson.
Okay. Excellent advice. And around how much would that be? Because if you're going to use a host, you have to pay for a host, whether that be Blog Talk or whatever. So how much a month roughly are you paying for your hosting company?
Well, Lipson, when I first started, and I'm sure they have the code out there, it was free for 30 or 60 days. And then they have plans starting at just $5. I believe depending on like how often you upload. But my plan right now is $20 a month, hosting through Lipson, and I really like them. They publish straight to YouTube automatically and a whole bunch of other platforms for you automatically, which I really like. So that cost for me is $20, but I know they have you can start out for free, or they have a $5 plan if you want to go a little lower.
Okay. And for those who are thinking about launching a podcast, you got to think about a hosting company. For video, like YouTube would be a hosting company. You can have your videos on the YouTube platform or the Vimeo platform when you guys are doing video. Similar, when you're doing audio, you're going to need a hosting platform, whether that be SoundCloud, Blog Talk, Lipson, like she mentioned, and there are a bunch of others out there as well that are pretty good, and the prices will vary on a monthly basis. Some of them are free, but the free ones are usually give you like 5 to 15 minutes of time, and if you need longer time than that, then you're gonna have to start paying for hosting unless somebody else has a freer resource out there. So we're gonna go to Christian next. What are the equipment that you're using right now for your podcast?
Cool. Yeah. While we were talking, I went and looked on some of my previous orders to see what we got. My mom, actually, which is the crazy part, is the tech person, and she's a baby boomer. But anyway, we have the Logitech laptop webcam. We just got it off of Amazon, the C615, and so you just put it on top of your computer, and it's really amazing, and it really has like upped the quality. I also got a tripod stand for my cell phone. It's flexible. You can make it tall or short, depending on where we are, if we're standing or if we're sitting. And so that's been super helpful. And the eBerry cobblestone microphone, which is my favorite. We tried another brand, and it didn't work as well. And so we went on with this one, and our sound quality has been pretty good ever since. And we got all that on Amazon. So.
Sounds good. So let's go next to Nikki C.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if you're breaking up.
Yeah. So I, like I said, sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
So I use, like I said before, I use Studio because I'm not
Talking to the
engineer.
microphone, please.
My co-host, my co-host is an engineer. Well, she can engineer. She went to school for that, but it got a little taxing with full-time jobs and all those good things. So we go to a studio, we record at the studio, and he mixes it all for us. Our sound, whatever we need added within it. But when one of our co-hosts moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, that was a problem, but we figured it out. So all of us all of our co-hosts, we all have the blue snow mic, and then we record. Two of my co-hosts record it into Audacity, and then I record into GarageBand. Whenever we're sick, or when my co-host isn't here, and she's in Lynchburg, she records into Audacity with her blue snowball mic, which she got from Best Buy. You can even get it on Amazon as well. And it comes with a nice little tripod. It has a USB port. You just plug it on in, and she records directly into Audacity. And then we FaceTime her, and I put on my headphones, me and my co-host, when we're in the studio, and we listen to her, and then she sends over the audio to our engineer, and he mixes it all in together. Just making sure, like, our timing is right when you're listening, and it's not, like, weird gaps or overlaps, and it's, like, doesn't make sense. So that's what we do now.
Okay, so that's an option for you guys out there. If you guys don't feel comfortable setting up everything yourself and buying the equipment, you can look into just paying for studio time, and then they have engineers that will do all the technical work for you, and then you guys can just focus on being hosts and focus on the content and the interviews. That would probably be more pricier, and that's not going to be mobile because the studio's in one location, so you always have to go to the studio usually. But that's something to think about if you guys are not tech savvy, or you really just don't want to do the extra work of the tech side, the editing side of things. You can hire somebody to do that for you. So I'm going to come up to Ayana next. And what is the equipment that you are using right now for your podcast? And is your podcast live, or is it pre-recorded and then you upload it?
No, my podcast is not live, but I have done 3 live shows, meaning that a little different than what we're doing right now, live with an audience listening at a venue. But day-to-day or weekly, because my podcast comes out twice a week, it is pre-recorded. I use a Yeti microphone, I did a lot of research on microphones, and I would suggest that, like one of the previous guests said, before you go investing in a microphone or anything, just get started so that you make sure that this is something that you really need and want to do. But I ended up buying my microphone from Best Buy, and that was once I was like, quite a few episodes in, and I was like, I like this, I'm doing this, so I went ahead and purchased it. The programs that I use when I record just myself, because I do these 7-minute Sunday shows, and when I record those, I just use QuickTime on my computer, and there's a recording feature. So that's by myself. And then when I record with guests, when I'm interviewing somebody, I use Zoom. And the young lady that I was just speaking and talking about going to the studio, I just thought about it while you were doing it. It might make you guys' life easier and cheaper if you guys, as guests, just all hopped on Zoom. The quality might not be exactly the same as the studio, but you can probably still send it to your engineer and just have him mix it, but you don't have to then mix the audio files. It's just everybody's already recorded because Zoom allows you to have more than one person on at a time. But I think you might have to pay a certain fee after you get to a certain amount of people. Anyway, I edit myself, and I use GarageBand to edit, and it's pretty easy. The one thing that I will say about Audacity is that just note that you have to download Audacity online, and it does, like a previous guest said, it does work for both Mac and PC, but there is like I don't know if it's exactly called a plug-in, but there's something that you have to do in order to get the audio files, to be able to pull audio files from your computer. So I just think that's worth mentioning, so that if somebody is a complete novice and they download this and they think, why isn't this working? I thought this was so easy. Just look at a YouTube video to guide you through it, I would say. So those are the things that I use, and that's how I record.
Outstanding. And last but not least, we are going to go to Patricia. Patricia, since you're the podcast maven, what equipment are you using?
Wow. Okay. So when I started off, like I said, with the Apple headset. And, I've done a couple of tests on microphones, and the Blue Snowball is great. The Yeti, people either love it or hate it. It also depends on how well you use it and your recording environment. But I'm going to say basic set. Start with the ATR 2100. I think another lady mentioned that she uses that, and that's an absolutely fabulous mic. First of all, it's really sturdy, so you don't have to worry about any accidents with it. The sound quality is very good. So don't be too worried about the price. The sound quality is good. And now you mentioned also, if you asked if anybody's using a USB interface. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it, but you don't need it to get started. But with the ATR 2100, it comes in a pack which has a USB connector, so you can just connect straight into your computer, into your laptop, or it has another cable which will allow you to connect to your USB interface if you want to get more involved in the mixing. So for a starter pack and even carrying on, the ATR 2100 is an excellent choice. One thing nobody did mention, which is a really cheap buy, it'll cost you $10 at the most. It's a pop filter. If you want your sound to be good and so that you don't have explosives on the mic when you mention letters like P, because they really pop, you just want to invest in a pop filter. Don't get carried away. The cheaper ones still work as good as the most expensive ones most of the time, and that will cost you about $10. But then, people won't be hearing a popping sound every time that you're speaking. And, it can help with people who smack their lips. Sometimes people don't actually realize that they do that. And when you're listening to it, it can be quite loud and distracting. As we said, with editing, GarageBand, excellent option to get started if you're on a MacBook. Audacity is also another option. You can use Zoom if you're interviewing people. It's not my favorite. I prefer to record over Skype, and you can get a free Skype recorder if you're on a Windows machine, or you can buy a software called Ecamm if you are on a Mac. I don't want to throw too much information at you, but, if people have any more questions, they can feel free to contact me and ask me. Ask me on social media, that's fine. I'm happy to give advice. But you just need those basic things to get started. We talked about hosting. Libsyn is a great option. If you wanted to host on your WordPress site, you can look at Blueberry. There are other hosting options. BuzzFeed is good. Some of the newer ones coming up, do your research. Do your research and find out what people say about them. Some companies have come up and disappeared in the last 2 years. So you're better off sticking with somebody who's got a good price range for you to get started and who has been around for a long time and can tell you about, can answer your questions about what you want to do. And that's basically it. Keep it simple, start recording, and just put it out there. That's my biggest advice. Just put it out there.
Excellent advice, ladies. You guys gave a lot of great information. We didn't talk too much about the interface, which is something I'll just mention. I use a Zune F4, which gives me 6 microphone plugins. So when I go mobile and I do my setups,
90 seconds.
When I do my setups where I have people in studio, I can connect up to 6 microphones and record that live. And that's something you might want to think about if you're trying to do something big like that. If you're just doing a one-on-one, then just stick to the advice the ladies gave, because it's very good advice. Last thing I want to do is just really quickly, 5-6 seconds, just mention your name, your social media, your website, so people can find you. Again, I'm going to list it in the resource page, but I just want you guys to do it now. We'll start with Jamila.
60 seconds.
Sure. So I'm Jamila Souffrant, again, from journeytolaunch.com, blog and podcast. And you can find me at all social media as Journey to Launch. And then, again, journeytolaunch.com. And anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find my podcast.
Ayana.
Ayana Angel of the Switch Pivot or Quit podcast. You can find us at switchpivotorquit.com, Switch Pivot or Quit on Instagram and Facebook, and SPQ podcast on Twitter. And you can listen on Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Blog Talk Radio.
Nikki C.
Yes, and this is Nikki C. from the Remedy podcast, and you can find the Remedy on anywhere where you get the podcast.
10 seconds.
You can find the Remedy on Twitter and IG at Remedy Podcast. You can also find me at The Urban Tea, and that is my blog, theurbantea.com.
Christian?
Yes, I'm Kristen Black. I'm Conversations K on Facebook and Twitter. On Instagram, it's Conversations_W_Kristen. Conversations is always spelled with the letter K on each of those. And my website is conversationsk.com. And you can find me and my mother's show, The Kristen Miss Betty Show, on Facebook and on my personal IG page.
And Patricia?
Hi, thank you. Okay, so it's Patricia Q. Jenkins, and I'm known as the Podcast Maven. My website is podcastmaven.com. You can find me on Facebook as the Podcast Maven. I'm most active on Instagram, and it's _podcast_Maven. And I look forward to chatting with you guys and answering any of your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies, for joining the panel. I appreciate you guys all. I will have all of this information listed on our resource page by tomorrow. So just go to blackpillradio.com to our resource page, and you'll be able to contact the ladies directly and listen to some of the advice that the ladies have. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's a new year, new start, and we're going to be bringing you some wonderful content. And starting in March, we're going to have video content as well. So I wish you guys the best, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Peace.